All right, sounds good. All right, I introduced the episode right about now. So, hello everyone. My name is Jaylon Jones. I'm the leader and founder of the United Afro Student Organizations, or the UASO, and I'm here today with Tyler Marr, a biology teacher at Da Vinci Communications, located in El Segundo. Mr. Marr, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Jaylon. Thank you. I'm honored and glad to be here.
No, of course, Mr. Marr. So getting to the first question. This is a question I've asked each and every teacher that's come on here. I've had Mr. Jackson, I've had Deepti, and I've had Miss Thomas, who isn't a teacher, but she works at DVC. The first question I always ask is, why did you decide to get into teaching? And specifically, why did you decide to get into biology?
I got into teaching. I really like to think of my role as a teacher as sort of my the sort of like final um, stage, I guess, of where life has led me. I initially had been interested in when I went to college. I went to UCLA and had initially been interested in acting and film directing and really applying the creative side to me. And after about a year of like trying to like dibble and dabble in that, kind of found that that wasn't really where I was called to, and had started taking some classes on diet and exercise, and it got me really back into science, which is a strength of mine in high school. And from there, I just sort of kept exploring it. I wasn't really interested in medical school. I wasn't interested in any of the professional health programs that a lot of my peers were interested in. I wanted to do something that was a little bit more dynamic. And the thing about diet and exercise, and I'm sure we're going to get to it even more, but it was so practical. It was so real. It was so seemed so important as a foundation for life, and it was something where I wanted to apply myself to. So I got into, uh, luckily, a nonprofit called Health Corps, and started working there, literally doing diet and exercise instruction and programming at high schools in California. And from there, I went into nonprofit management, and it wasn't the space that I felt I was best able to apply myself and best able to be successful. And I kept having this teaching idea in the back of my mind as something that I wanted to pursue, but I wanted to see kind of what else was out there, where else maybe my strengths could benefit me. And after that experience, I felt like I'd sort of given it a shot, and felt I really missed being in a high school. I really missed having those types of interactions and being able to have an impact that felt really real and tangible. And so from there, I applied to Teach for America and became a teacher in Los Angeles. And if I was going to teach anything, it was only going to be biology. So it's the subject that I really gravitated to. It's a core class. I studied physiology in college, but biology seemed to be a little bit more accessible at the high school level in terms of like employment and making sure that I could reach as many students as possible.
Mhm.
And I love the subject. It's about life,
Right.
and it's about how it works. And once you understand that, a lot of things in the world, I think, start to make sense.
Right. And would you say once you got into biology and you start to study it, you kind of had a different perspective on life itself?
Um, I mean, I definitely attribute my understanding of biology, even going back to taking AP biology in high school, to really laying out a foundational understanding of the processes that help life to exist. And it's ironic because I kind of had this conversation with my biology students this year. Like, once you can sort of like get that access code, if you will, to understanding life, like you just start seeing everything around you in a different way. Like you start appreciating how magnificent life is and how improbable life is, and how so much has to go right in order for a cell to be able to exist. And then when you start putting all the pieces together, like, oh well, we're billions of cells. It is a machine like no other.
Right. And I think one thing in recent times that's made me kind of appreciate life more is I looked, there's like this counter online and shows you how many people are born a day, how many people die a day. And you see how many people, died, but for some reason you're still here. Out of 10 million people that could have died that day, you're still here. So that's one thing that's kind of been able to make me see life from a different perspective. It's almost like what you said, each thing has to go right, for one cell to work. It's like each thing has to go right each night for you to be able to wake up in the morning. You never know what can happen. You can have some, lingering disease that's within your genes or your family that could kill you. And we've seen it happen to celebrities and just people in general. So, you definitely hit the spot right there. What is the biggest thing you've learned from teaching so far?
Oh man, these are heavy hitters.
Yeah.
What's the biggest thing I've learned from teaching?
Mm-hmm.
I think that a couple things are coming to mind. One thing is I've heard teaching described as a craft, as something almost like a trade, right? Where you used to have, I mean, a while ago, we used to have people who were masters at their trade, right? And teaching has really stood out to me the more that I've been in it, like that it is truly a craft. It is an art. It is something that you continue to get better at, and the height of which you need to get to in order to be a master is it's almost hard to imagine, because teaching just beats you. It forces you to face what you're not good at, what you're not comfortable with. It forces you to be creative in ways that um, you either are going to rise to the challenge or you're going to flop. And when I think about how important education is and how meaningful it is, of a role that I'm playing in my community and in society by educating 120 students a year, it sort of unlocks uh, creativity through passion in a way that I think is what called me into like film and acting, where I can really take that creative energy and put it in a place with purpose that helps it to breathe and evolve into something that that can be incredible. It doesn't always work out. There's always goals and things that we want to achieve, but the fact that it is something that I continuously have to refine has taught me a lot of humility. And I think teaching has also taught me a lot about grace, that I've always been someone who's been able to achieve a lot by my own efforts, if that makes sense to you. And teaching is one of those things where it's like you're just crushing into a brick wall over and over and over again, trying to break through. And you don't ever really feel like you have made a significant dent. But if you look around, right, there's all these pieces on the floor, and there's all these like shavings that are coming off. And you only realize that once you take a step back, right? And you look at how much progress you can see, because you can't see that as you're grinding every day. And so the grace that it's taught me has helped shape me, I think, a lot as a person, and just helped me to embrace the toughness in a way that is different than anything I've ever experienced.
Right. No, that's 100%. You literally have to beat on your craft, to be able to be good at something, you're not gonna be able to be great at something within a year. Sometimes it takes multiple years. It takes time. Success comes to those that are patient and those that are willing to go down the bumpy road continuously and continuously after failure, after failure, after failure, and still get back up and rise. So I've learned that even through my short 16 years of life, I'm like, if you want to get good at something, you really want to go at something, well, you're gonna have to continuously be on your craft, and those shavings are gonna come off. And you keep on molding it to the person you're supposed to be. And that kind of leads into my next question. On the Da Vinci website, you talked about growing the spirit, growing character, growing as a person. Kind of explain what that means and what does that look like for a person to grow their spirit and their character?
Yeah, I've been fortunate to be, the cross country coach and one of the track coaches
Yeah.
as well. And I think that's helped me to sort of solidify this role that I can play in helping to shape people. I think that's I've come to learn through teaching. It's there's like content and there's standards that we're supposed to meet, but um, it's hard to argue with how significant a role, and maybe more so in terms of how meaningful of a role it is when we think about what part of our students' story that we play in shaping them as human beings, right? Like, you may not remember anything about cells 3 years from now, 5 years from now, but I would hope that you remember the skills and the character that we shaped during the year. And I really believe that that is the greatest power I think that teachers have. And by being in a high school and kind of playing all those roles like you mentioned, or like I mentioned before, I think that it's about giving students and athletes the space to struggle, the space to face the challenge, the space to seize the thing inside of them that's going to drive them. Because high school is practice. High school is practice. Like life happens after that. Some go to college, some don't, but either way, you're going to face challenges. You're going to face things that feel immensely hard, things that make you feel like you don't know anything. And if you're not prepared for those times, it doesn't matter how much you know about biology, right? Like it matters more about how you're going to persevere, because once you learn about biology, you understand that life is about change and survival, right? And those that survive, they live long enough to reproduce, they live long enough to teach the things that they've learned to make their population, right, or community better. And so if you're not equipped with those tools and those skills, the sad truth is you're not going to make it. You're not going to be able to survive. And so like that just is such a meaningful and critical thing for me, I think, as an educator and a coach, that like we have to be willing and ready to push and to then help mold our students to be able to face those things so that they're ready to survive, right? Because we believe in each of our students, but at some point in time, 3 years, as soon as you graduate, we're not going to be in your life anymore, and you're going to have to navigate, and that's when you're really tested, right? And so I just think like when I say like the spirit, building character, things of that nature, like those are the life skills that are going to help us make it.
No, most definitely. I mean, life is all about challenges. When I first created my organization, I was doing my charity event. That was probably the most stressful time of my life. Those 2 months were, harder than anything I probably have had to do. Constantly trying to worry about, I need money here, I need to find funding here. I was going to different churches, asking for money. I was campaigning. It was like it was a whole ordeal. And I realized, this is like a taste, a small taste of what the real world must feel like when you're trying to set something up or trying to build something. Whether it's a business, it's building yourself, trying to build a career. I was like, this is just a small taste, but I think that's what life is. That's why we cherish life so much, because it's the fact that those who do survive, they hold their accomplishments very high because they know how hard it was to get them. So I think through going through life, you begin to appreciate things way, 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 way more. And so, as teenagers, we typically don't see the small things, but I guarantee you, as you get older, everyone always says it, you'll start to see the small things mean a little bit more sometimes, than the rest of the things that we think are so important within life. And you mentioned track while you were talking. So you are one of the track coaches, and I talked to the other track coach, Mr. Jackson, not too long ago, and I asked him this same question, but this time, I asked him this question about football because he had played football. Is there anything you've taken from track that you've been able to implement within your life? So the way you interact with the students, the way the way practice flows, the way you're able to, talk and be around your athletes. Is there anything you've taken from them or just the sport itself and being able to implement it into your own life now?
Um, so I think like when I approach coaching, I approach coaching having strong resolve in what I'm preaching to my athletes. Like I have to believe in what I'm saying, first
Right.
of all, but like I feel confident knowing that I sort of built that through experience
Mm-hmm.
in my own life, like through college, through running in cross country, in high school, through persevering through those challenges that I have experienced along the way. I have found time and time again, each of those stories, each of those moments where I've been challenged finds a place to sort of breed and breathe in my coaching. Like we find ourselves sharing certain stories, certain memories, certain experiences. When I'm preparing my athletes for a race, I call upon those experiences that I had, and I think that's what it's kind of like the magic that sort of I can bring because I've lived it, right? Like, and I know what it's like, and I know what's worked, and that gives me a sense of confidence, and that gives me that resolve that I think emanates and that my athletes can feel, and then they can embody that, right? Because if I'm just speaking from falsehood, right? Like if I'm just making up stuff, experiences that I didn't have, like you could kind of see, you could see through that, right? Like like,
Yes.
that doesn't, I mean, cool, but that doesn't really sound really like it's going to help me.
Right.
And so like, there's a lot of power in that. And so like, we have to, like you were saying, live through experience, live through those challenges because it gives us credibility, right? And I really believe in energy, and I believe that that really comes out and people can feel that, when you call upon things like that. Um, yeah, I think I answered your question.
Yeah, no, most definitely. And you had talked about going back and trying to remember the times that you struggled and try and use that to give your athletes a bit of motivation. One of my favorite motivational speakers, I guess you could say, he's not really a motivational speaker, but he's a pretty cool dude, and his name is David Goggins. So he was a Navy SEAL. He's done a couple amazing things. One of them running 100 miles for 100-mile race each week for 8 weeks. So as you can see, that's 800 miles within 8 weeks. So pretty cool, a pretty big accomplishment. And he calls it his cookie jar. So he dips into his cookie jar when he's having a tough time, and the cookie jar is filled with memories of him struggling but persevering. And so it's kind of reminding himself, look, I've done this before. Why can't I do this? I've done this in the past, and I'm dealing with a challenge now. Why can't I beat this challenge if I beat this? This is way harder. And so that's kind of what it is, kind of like going to the cookie jar, finding your struggles and like, look, I struggle with the same thing, but here's how you can struggle through it and make it past it. Here's how you can persevere through it. And kind of giving that motivation. So I definitely like that. That's something I have to do to myself as well when, I'm going through that tough time or that challenge. Kind of just reminding yourself that you're better and you're 10 times stronger than that.
Yeah, and another thing that you had brought to mind was, we do have a mantra or motto on our team that was sort of there when Coach Jackson and I inherited it. But in cross country, we say at the end of every practice and every meet, every day in every way, we get better and better. And it's funny to me how many times in my personal life that I find myself like coming back to that. Like it goes through my head because it's this thing that reminds us, right? Like no matter what, the focus is growth and getting better. No matter how hard this is, no matter how much you want to puke, no matter how hard or how badly your legs hurt and your muscle aches, how fast your heart's beating, you've got to fight through it in order to be a better version of yourself than you were. And you're going to come out of that fire sharpened, right? No matter what. So always believing in that, I find has helped me to continue to try and look at the difficulties with a bit of grace.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the most important parts about being an athlete is, of course, a diet and nutrition. And so, a lot about diet. I had known that personally when I was in your class. Someone I heard about you were into diet. You had good nutrition. I even heard you were a vegetarian, correct?
Yeah, vegetarian.
Vegetarian. So I had known that for a while. Do you ever put a diet onto your athletes, or not put it onto them, but remind them that getting better and growing muscles and getting faster, whatever they're trying to do, it's more of kind of like an 80% nutrition, 20% of working. Do you ever try and give them a diet and say you can follow this, or you can keep doing what you're doing, but this is the way to grow?
Yeah. I mean, you've already spoken to Coach Jackson, but we literally give them dietary suggestions because, right? I mean, already as a person, you need the proper fuel and food, but as an athlete, we demand even more of you, and you demand a lot of your body. So you have to be putting in the right fuel if you want to perform. Otherwise, what are we doing? Are we here just like hanging out? And so like we definitely provide suggestions, recommendations, things that we eat. I mean, he's vegan, I'm vegetarian,
Yeah.
both athletic, and I think we try to model that too for them. That we've been able to be successful, and we believe that you can too, based on the things that we've learned and read and seen. But I used to work in, like I said, the nonprofit and diet and exercise, and that was all about educating our country's teens and adolescents, because they were this sort of forgotten population. There was a whole bunch of resources going to early education, primary schools, and getting the young kids to eat breakfast and to have whole grain, but there was no messaging for teens. And so what do we got? We got for breakfast, teenagers drinking Snapple and eating hot Cheetos. And that's literally, I mean, that happens still at Da Vinci, but even like at the school I used to work at, like that was it. Right. And we had some kids who were like pregnant or young moms, and if you're not paying attention to that, like
Right.
you're asking for a legacy of disease, of pain, of financial insecurity, like of just mental fatigue, all of those things. That it's all connected, right? Like so I really believe in like holistic wellness, holistic education,
Right.
holistic living, and that's looking at the whole body as a system, right? Like if I'm, no matter what you want to be, like you have to understand that your cells need energy. They got to get it from somewhere. We're not like plants, and we can't just go stand outside for the sun to feed us.
Right.
Like that's all coming in through our mouth and through our digestive system. And
Right.
so if we're not paying attention to what we put in there, right, just like if we're not paying attention to what type of fuel you put in your car, well, that engine's going to blow, right?
Mhm.
And the cost of that is going to be immense. It may not happen right now, but later down the line, like it's going to malfunction. And that's really what we're seeing in terms of obesity and diabetes across the world. And I've been trying to find ways to build that into my class because I just think it's so critical.
Right.
And for you all, especially like, teenagers, when we think about, well, you're 15, 16, and, hopefully living into your 70s or 80s. I mean, those are lessons that you're going to carry for the next 6 decades and hopefully onto your progeny or your children, right? And your grandchildren. Like that's affecting generations. And so like I think we have to really like um focus on what types of seeds are we planting.
Right. No, that's important. No, that's definitely important. But that last part was amazing, planting the seeds, because I always tell people, you can you can plant it, put a seed in the soil, right? But if it doesn't, get water, it doesn't have the right sunlight, and it's not being taken care of, well, that seed will never grow. It always stay just stuck in the soil. It'll never grow. So when we put a seed into a child's mind, or we try and give someone a piece of knowledge or information, we have to make sure that their mind is ready to water it, and put a little bit of sunlight on it. But as humans, we kind of have to gravitate towards that. It's almost like the Matrix, the red pill and the blue pill. You can stay, ignorant, or you can, choose the red pill and take in that knowledge. And a lot of people don't want to accept that. A firsthand account of a student. Yes, a lot of kids my age do not eat the most healthiest foods. I have seen people eating hot Cheetos in the morning. I have seen a little bit worse than that. I have seen cake. I personally cannot eat cake that early in the morning. Cake's good, whatever, but I personally just can't eat it that early. And also, sugar kind of messes me up. So just seeing that, I'm like, wow. And so even over quarantine, I started working out way, way more. I'm talking like 7 days. Yeah. So every day a week, and maybe I'll take a break on the second week. I was going crazy, and I still am a bit, but I realized that if I want to go crazy on this and repair my body afterwards, I have to eat right. So I cleaned up my whole entire diet for the most part. And so the foods I'm able to eat are helping me. And I used to be vegan, but I wasn't in the right mindset to do it. And so I started losing weight. So I end up eating meat again. But I find that the diet is one of the most important parts of being an athlete. So that's why I had to ask that question, because I was like, these kids have to be eating good just from the accounts I've heard. I've heard some crazy things happen at practice. I'm like, you guys did what? I've seen people walk down the stairs and they're going real slow. I'm like, you good? They're like, yeah, I'm sore. I'm like, oh, you guys probably crazy the other day. I went to one of the little practices over the summer, and we know how that went. I was blown. I was out. I was in the sand.
That was a good time.
Yeah, I was blown out. So I realized diet has to be so important in this, because I was out, and I know a lot of kids are too. So no, that's definitely important. We got to fix up the diet. And so you talked about childhood obesity. You were fighting childhood obesity. Um, what was the strategy that you guys tried to do to try and educate people on childhood obesity? Were you guys trying to educate kids on like health? Was it educating the parents on health and the right foods? What type of strategy did you guys use to try and help fight it?
That's a great question. I think um, I really boil that down to a couple of very simple but very meaningful ingredients. One of them being building relationships. You know, I think that it worked because of the energy that we tried to bring, but also like um, building camaraderie amongst ourselves with the students. And and when I said holistic before, like that is very much the approach that we had to take in order to really affect the school. So the nonprofit that I used to work at would send one individual, we'd call them a health core coordinator, to a high school, and they were in charge of really making that whole high school healthy. And so there was a lot that of work that I had to do to build relationships with the students, but to build relationships with the administrators, with the teachers, to allow me to go into their classroom, for them to understand, like, hey, this is important. I know it's going to take one of your lessons this week, but it's a really important message that we have to communicate to connecting with the parents. All of those people had to be involved, right? Like one lesson, one video or one documentary isn't going to change your life. It is the series of steps that are taken, like we talked about growing seeds, right? Like that seed is not going to grow because you gave it water one day out of the entire year. Like it's consistent messaging. But it's also like meeting them where they are, I think is really important. Like I can't go around telling every school that I go to, here's what you got to do and here's why you got to do it, and you're not going to do it, right? Because you want to talk about inequity, inequality, like I mean it's important to recognize that your zip code literally can determine how healthy you can be.
Right.
And that has to do with food deserts. It has to do with access, right, to fresh produce. Like all of that's not equal. And I think it's we have to be very mindful about understanding what communities we're walking into, and then knowing how to make health accessible. As sad as that sounds, right? But like, money is a big thing. Working with people who are low income on using food stamps, right? Like you can't always afford produce, or people like to say that it's more expensive. But when you kind of like set yourself up and then you start buying fresh things, even canned food, even frozen food, like per meal, oh my gosh, it is like 10 to 20% the cost of going out to eat.
Oof. That's okay. That's and another important thing to know is, as you're saying that, I'm thinking a bag of hot Cheetos. Someone could fact check me. Is maybe $1.99. I've seen fruit for more than that. I've seen fruit cups. I'll always go to this liquor store right across the street. There's a whole bunch of nice people there, and I look at the prices and I'm like, I can get a bag of chips for less than a fruit bowl. Why should that ever exist? So it's like we're set up to want to eat unhealthy. Kids are set up because if your mom gives you $5 and you're going to that liquor store across the street, well, that fruit cup is $3. Those chips are $1.50. What are you gonna do? I can get 2 bags of chips and one bag of some fruit. Why would I? And a kid's mindset is that. That used to be my mindset as well. I would even do that. So this system has set itself for failure, and it sucks, and it's sad to think about because I looked at it and I'm like, I hope these kids can stop eating this diet as they go further in life, because I still know people that are eating unhealthy diets and they're going through life, and I'm like, it's gonna catch up to you one day. A consistently bad diet, exercise is pretty much spelling death, letter by letter. You put in D-E-A, you're getting closer to the T and H. It's like you're gonna eventually have to do one or the other. So no, that is so important, and that is something I've done. And even in the past couple of weeks, I've wanted more home cooked meals or meals that I cook myself than food that is bought. I got tired of it. Sometimes I'll slip up and I'll get some fast food, but even then I'm like, I could have cooked something better than this. Something that would have given me nutrition.
I really love the examples you're bringing up because that's real, right? Like, I mean, you're talking, I mean, literally, you look at every high school, like you look around what's around them. Right. Oh my gosh, fast food, liquor store, corner market, right? Like even if I wanted to, right, where would I go? Like, there's no way I'm going to be able to walk to someplace nearby. And then like you just talk about all of these chips stacked, like having to battle your friends and argue with your friends, like, hey, no, we should go walk 2 miles to go get, go get something healthy. Like that's not going to happen. Right. And so you're right. The way that things have been structured is it has to do with the economy. It has to do with, I mean, we can go as far into racial factors as well. I mean, there's a whole lot to unbury there. But I think it's important, like when we talk from that perspective, that we also understand it's not fair to just say, hey, and shame people for not being healthy, right? Because like you just explained, it's not always their choice, and
Right.
oftentimes it's not. And so the way I think about like how we can, one of the more successful ways to make people healthier is to introduce people to new things.
Right.
Because like if you've only been given $5 and you've been and going to get chips because you can get 2-3 bags with that $5 every time, you may not have even been exposed to the things that taste better. You mentioned liking and wanting homemade food again because, well, in quarantine, I'm sure you've had a lot more time to eat
Right.
homemade food, and your taste buds are like lighting up, and you're like, whoa,
Like,
this makes me feel better. This
right.
tastes better. Maybe I want this more, right? And so it's the exposure that we got to have in order to help us add the good things and then slowly leave the bad things, right?
Right.
It's addiction. That's really what it is.
Food is probably one close a very high, addiction. We often say addiction, we think drugs, but food and money can be addictions as well. Those are two addictions that we overlook. And so I feel like nowadays we're seeing money as addiction, but food is still not there. We still can't put that in our heads. And I love how you said don't shame people, because I started to realize that I was like, these people aren't introduced to it. They don't know. They're taking the blue pill and they don't know. They're unaware because it's bliss. Ignorance is bliss. They've enjoyed the chips. They enjoyed these unhealthy foods early in the morning. Maybe a bag of chips or so is not going to kill you. It's not. But eating it so consistently and eating it at the wrong time of the day and not adding something that's nutritious within the day, well then yeah, now you're spelling death. But like you said, there's a lot of disparities. Economically, there's disparities. If you've ever heard of Ron Finley, he's called the Gorilla Gardener. And so he has a TED Talk talking about how if you look at if you look at the corner streets, if you're in a specific neighborhood, it's just liquor stores. There's not necessarily good foods. And so I'll give you an example. In my neighborhood, when I was vegan, I couldn't find vegan products in my neighborhood. Very rare. Very, very rare did I find something vegan and something that it was vegan and I could trust it. I could look at it and be like, yeah, I trust this. Half the time they'll be like, this doesn't have this in it and this in it. I look at the ingredients, I'm like, well, I can't eat that, so therefore it's not vegan. So I would have to go outside my community just to get food to fit my diet. And that's when I realized it's hard to be vegan and black at the same time. I
Mm,
can't get those foods in my neighborhood. I was going to other neighborhoods, people who did not look like me. I'm buying from people that don't look like me, but they're giving me the
mm,
food that I wanted for my diet. So that's why it's so important that we bring these places like Whole Foods or places like Farmers Market. Shoot, we don't need to bring them necessarily. We need to either bring them or make our own. Make our own in our own communities. And the high school, as you said, there's a 7-Eleven right near our high school. People walk to all the time, and there's plenty of options that they could choose that are unhealthy. Now, there's healthy options in there as well, but there's too many opportunities to eat unhealthy more than there are opportunities to eat healthy, and that's why we have such a big issue, I believe.
and you want to connect this to biology. I mean, evolutionarily, our taste buds have evolved
Yeah.
to be able to recognize fat and sugar,
Yeah.
because those things, well, one, they taste good, and fat has way more calories, over twice as many calories you get from fat as sugar. You get 9 calories per gram from fat, 4 calories per gram from sugar. And so the body recognizes, right, like, man, well, if I need to survive, right, when you go back to hunter gatherer time, like, it takes a lot of energy to go hunt something down, to go gather something. So when I find something with fat, like, I'm going to eat more of that because I know that's going to help me to live and survive longer than I would have if I'm, just eating things that are not giving me enough calories. And so when we think about all the fast foods, all the snacks, chips,
Mhm.
salt and fat,
Yeah.
right? Things that stimulate us, things that just make us feel good, right? And I mean, you do research, there has been research done on scanning the brain and seeing what areas light up when we eat certain foods. When we eat sugar, we know that areas in the brain light up that are releasing dopamine, and dopamine is the
Yeah.
same neurotransmitter that's released like when people are doing cocaine, or heavy drugs because it's the pleasure center. It
Right.
makes us feel good, right? So obviously, if you're gonna put like cake, chips, Snapple in front of me, and then like a watermelon, or something like a spinach salad,
Mm.
oh, hands down, my body and my mind tell me, well, all of these things taste so good. This is what's going to make me feel good, so I'm going to eat them. And
Right.
so we understand that the body is something that we can't even always control. And so our environment has so much to do with our health, has so much to do with how we think, and what types of decisions we make. It is not easy for a drug addict to say no to drugs. And
Right.
it's not easy for the body, which has been designed for sugar and fat, to say no to sugar and fat.
Right. We literally crave it. And so one thing I've had to do is it's just discipline. I had to put in my mind because I was like, I'm not gonna get out of this. I'm gonna keep eating unhealthy foods. Eventually I'm gonna have to put some discipline in here, and I'm just gonna have to say, look, I call it burning the boats. And so if you could read it, it's right behind me. If you look up there, right there, I have a sign that says burn the boats. And what that means is it's pretty much saying, look, I'm going, it's a story, and it's this general, he says, look, man, we're gonna take this island. And he says, but I'm going to burn the boats. And so what that's saying is you can't retreat. It's either you take the island or you die trying. So the way I see it is, look, we either eat healthy or we die trying to, because I don't want to go back. And so I have hopped on the boat, and retreated a couple times, but mainly I've tried to stay on that island and fight it out. Whatever enemy I'm fighting, those thoughts in my head saying, take the day off, you can eat, you've done good. Or those thoughts saying, go ahead, grab that bag, grab that. It's kind of like, look, just burn them, throw them away, burn them. And so I even bought a dog chain that says it on it as well, and I keep it with me. Remind myself, burn the boats. Don't give yourself well. And I initially started it for something else, but I added my diet to it because I was like, I'm going crazy right now, working out a whole bunch. I should probably get a good diet. So that was definitely important. But Mr. Marr, we're gonna wrap it up right here.